Consumer Sam here, and have I got news for you? So I picked up the Revolution 5 Pro controller by Nacon, my single largest investment in a gaming controller. I paid for it from my own pocket, so it's a totally unbiased review. From the point of order to being one of the first people to get their hands on one, I've been in absolute love with this controller. And I just wanted to talk through it at a higher level about things I really like and some things that are really breaking my heart, making me contemplate returning it. So let's start with why you should buy this controller. The craftsmanship is amazing. The feel of this controller is really great. The rubberized grips really feel satisfying in the hand. Maybe a little bit shallow, but nonetheless beautiful. There is plastic, however, around the triggers, the rear buttons, and the D-pad, which doesn't really feel all that premium, but pressing them feels actually quite satisfying, so that's really good. For me personally, the back top two buttons and the top two trigger buttons, they feel the most satisfying to press. They're both clicky like a mouse button, so that's brilliant. The lower rear two buttons are actually still clicky, and they have a rubberized texture around them, which is really nice. Premium finish, blends in quite well with the grips. Maybe a little bit too well, but we can discuss that in the next section. The shape buttons and all the other buttons are actually quite similar in the feel they give in pressing, even the D-pad buttons. They are membrane buttons, so not as nice as the clicky mouse buttons on the top and on the back. The size of the shape buttons is actually really good as well. And for a membrane button, they're actually really well. They press really nicely. The feel of them, they feel a lot more premium than the standard stock controller buttons. But yeah, nowhere near a clicky mouse buttons. They feel premium enough to be classified as superior to the stock option. So great job here, Nacon. There are two different D-pad buttons you can swap out for or covers. They are very plasticky, so they don't feel that great in the hand, but actually on the controller, they feel really good. You can't tell the plastic feel, so it's quite good. And I love the fact that you can customize it. So for me personally, I didn't like this 8-way one. I kept getting an error of which one I was pressing. So, if I was pressing, for example, left, it sometimes would register down just because it's all together. It's not really easy to feel when you're trying to press them in a heated moment. So for me, the 4-way D-pad is the preferred option, especially for FPS gaming. The rubber around the thumbsticks and the chrome finish, the lighting as well, if I turn this on, this light around here, all are actually very satisfying and I really do like them. Maybe not as value add in terms of your gameplay, but the look of the controller is really nice. The default thumbsticks are actually really good for grip. As you can see, they are slightly domed inside, not outside, so your thumb really sits inside there and it can't move, especially with the rubberized edges, really sits there well. The raised one's a little bit more slippery, hasn't got any real texture on the top. You've just got texture around the sides, which is really good, but you could easily slip. You've also got this domed one here, which is domed outwards. Still really good texture. I really love what they've done on the texture on this. It's not really focusing in the camera too well, but it's got little dots and it grips your thumbs really well. So that's really nice. And with these ones, the standard ones that come on the controller, you can use your Control Freeks for PS5 or PS4. I've been using my cheap ones, which I've really struggled to take off. It grips it so well, it doesn't move at all. So taking it off might be a bit painful if I decide to return this controller. So let's see how that goes. Just for comparison, this is the PS4 controller I was using before. And these same sticks, they just don't stay in place at all. So on the Nacons, you can't move that at all, so it's really good. If I swap this out and just show you on there, so you believe me, I'm not lying. You see, that's not moving at all, so that's brilliant. Just for comparison, I'll put these domed ones on, so you guys can see how they look on there as well. That's actually really satisfying. They do that. Very easy to swap out, so if you play different games, you can swap these out as quick as you need. When they click in as well, they stay in position really well. There's no risk of it coming off, and they don't turn out either, so it's really good. One of the biggest pros of this controller that everyone's talking about is they have the Hall effect joysticks, which essentially means there's a magnet inside, so no friction, which means you won't get stick drift, in theory at least. But I'll get onto the cons and I'll tell you my experience with stick drift there. And talking about the LED lights, it's really good that you can actually, when you're going through the different profiles, you can see exactly what you're doing on this controller. Or if you're mapping one of the back buttons, you can see all of that. It goes to 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can tell exactly which profile you're in. So it makes it really easy, not having to look on the computer or on any app to see which profile you're in, what you're doing. You can pretty much do everything on this controller, which is why it's got so many damn buttons. And coming over to the accessory box, again, Nacon's really thought this one out, and they've included quite a few things. You've got the weights in there. I believe this is an external mic, because the controller doesn't have a mic of its own. So if you wanted to connect that, you could, and then utilize the mute buttons over here. But I don't use that. And you can notice I'm missing some of the weights, and there's actually a really good reason for that. So this controller, you can swap out the weights at the back here. So if I just take this off somehow, you see I've put some weights in there. The reason I've done that is actually quite interesting. For me, when I think about any handheld device, I want it to be as light as possible. With the controller, I do usually put my arms on the table, so I don't need to worry about the weight as much. What I did notice with this controller is quite top heavy, so the controller wants to fall out of your hands a little bit. It's not too bad, but it is there. So I'll put the weights in at the bottom, the lowest ones. I think they are 10 grams each. And what that does is the controller wants to stay in your palms then. It doesn't want to fall out, which really helps with your gameplay. Yeah, as I said, I've noticed it being top heavy, so hence the weights being lower down, move the center of the gravity of the controller lower down, which is really useful. Do bear in mind though, I am quite a casual player who plays maybe 2 hours in a single gaming session at the max, and at no point have I thought this controller to be too heavy. Now, if I was playing at on a sofa and where I don't have anything to rest my arms on, I might find that a little bit heavy over 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. But because I'm at my desk and I'm relaxed like this, actually the weight doesn't bother me at all. The controller also has really great customization options. There are 4 profiles as mentioned. You can assign different controls to your different buttons. You can pretty much swap them out for any of the face buttons or press of the thumbsticks or anything like that. You can do it on the fly with the classic mode, and then it just gives you an option. You got to read the instructions, which one of the negative things about this controller, they didn't really come with any, so you have to go on their website to find them. But you can program them on the fly. Otherwise, you use the PC app. Apparently, there will be a mobile app coming soon, but currently it's just a PC app. And there's a lot of combination of these buttons you got to get right to get it connected to the PC. But it's not too difficult once you do get started and learn what to do. On the app, you've also got options to customize your response on these thumbsticks, which is actually quite cool. You can really, really dial it into the way it suits you. You know how in Call of Duty you have things like dynamic, linear. You have similar options on the software of this controller, which I'll be flashing on the screen right now. I did find though, for me personally, playing Call of Duty, I want Call of Duty to do that because it's all pre-known and everyone's tested it. I found for me on this controller, linear was the only option in the app, and then in Call of Duty I was using dynamic. Overall, it worked really well once I got those settings dialed in. I did try all the other ones, but it was really, really making it difficult for me to get a good control on my aim, so I decided to keep it linear, and that worked really well. So that's pretty much all the good things I wanted to mention about this controller. Now comes the heartbreak, the bad things about this controller, and trust me, there's a few, so you should know. Starting with the obvious, there are way too many buttons on this controller that do not provide any value to the user. I mean, it's mainly at the back. I did count them. I think I counted around 12 buttons. And as I mentioned, when you are connecting this to your PC, you got to get this in this off PC. You can have it in PS5 or PS4, which is a bit crazy. It needs to be in wired mode. And then I think you can get connected, which, is painful, especially when you are in the middle of a game. I've had to do this with, I've been testing the different response curves where I've had to change it to PS4, PS5, and resurging on Vondo. It doesn't connect back as quick, so what happens is I fall to my death, so game's over. So it's really painful in that sense. It should really be a lot easier. I mean, if it's in PC mode, it should just connect to your PC. Just makes sense, right? So a little bit annoyed with that one. I mean, just look at these buttons. You've got the volume up, down, Bluetooth, which, by the way, you can't Bluetooth connect this controller to a PC. The Bluetooth is purely for headsets, which is, again, something I dislike. You know, you've got a Bluetooth system in here, so make it usable, compatible with your PC as well. And then, for example, on PS4, PS5, you have to use the dongle, again, have it wired. The controller does not work over Bluetooth on any device. You've also got these two buttons here. One's a sync button, I believe, and the other one's the wired to wireless option, which again is just like, why have we got so many buttons? It makes no sense whatsoever. Regarding the other inputs, the lower rear two buttons, they're a little bit too flush to the side grip, which is a little bit difficult to realize sometimes when I'm using it. Can't really show you. It's difficult to tell if my hands are or my fingers are on here or there. So sometimes I do miss the press a little bit. Still very clicky, and you can pretty much click them anywhere. They register quite well, and it's a lot of getting used to. They require you to use your ring finger, which I haven't used at all with controllers before. And sometimes right now I am using both of these as the same input, which almost makes me feel like this whole back on both sides is either jump or crouch, and feel really good about doing that. Sometimes when I do panic, like I am a very panicky gamer, even with a KD of 1.6, I jump around when I'm getting shot or when I'm running away. So yeah, maybe I shouldn't talk about that. But if your muscle memory is quick to actually learn, you can program these to one of the other controls, so then you never have to take your fingers off or your thumbs off the thumbsticks, which would be really ideal. And then moving on to the D-pad, as mentioned before, the 8-way D-pad I found for games where it's not required, you just need 4 ways. By the way, you do change that setting on the app. You can change it to an 8-way or a 4-way input, and I did that, but I was still struggling with that because I kept pressing the edge, just because it doesn't give you as much of a feel as this D-pad does. So I've been using this and it's great. I have no complaints with this one, but with the 8-way one, I was really struggling with that one. And then one of the next things for me are these lower triggers here. So I've got that one set to 4-way. Now, they're not really adaptive, so you can't utilize it in the same way you can a PS5 controller, for example, where you might be playing a game like Spider-Man or any other story mode game that changes the resistance of these depending on what the character is doing. With this, it is literally the same resistance, although the resistance is good. You can't change that, and considering they're not clicky buttons, it's a little bit disappointing. You can change the response again on the app, which is why I say the app's quite good. So it's 0 to 10%, so pretty much like a clicky button, but you don't get the click, so you get the input really quickly on the travel base, and you can really work with that and move it so it's lower down, or it's the whole way. So for a racing game, you can adapt it to that, and hence you'll have a different profile on your controller for that. The haptic feedback, which is the vibrations of the controller, so this only works on PC or PS4. I think it works on PS4 games on PS5 as well. But doesn't work on PS5. I mean, that makes no sense whatsoever. PS5 is the latest gen console, so you would expect it to work on that, and you wouldn't care if it didn't work on PS4. That's something they haven't really solved, and I've personally not tried it myself, but what I've read on the reviews is the feedback itself isn't as accurate as a PS5 controller. So it gives you vibrations, but it doesn't feel as nice as a PS5, which really is immersing you in the game. So that's something to think about as well. Maybe with a firmware update they will change that in the future, but we'll have to wait and find out. Now, the biggest reason why I'm considering returning this controller is the movement on the joystick and the accuracy. I don't know if you'll be able to see with this. That movement there that you're seeing there, that does not register. So, you know, when you're trying to control recoil of a gun and you just want to move it down a little bit, the first little bit of movement is dead. So for me, that is like stick drift, the opposite of stick drift, which is actually really painful. So I've not really dialed in when I need to control the recoil kill. So on the risers, it'll be a little bit more obvious, and that's what I use for my gaming. You see that movement? That is way too much movement. And that's not registering any movement on the joystick when looking at one of the apps online. Just for comparison, here is the PS4 controller, which I've been using for over a year, and solid, no movement whatsoever. So as soon as you move that, it's going to register an input. Whereas here, look at that, moving so much. And that's my biggest problem with this. It makes me feel like my accuracy is not there. Being a jumpy player myself, and really, you know, panicking situations, I can't deal with that. I go too far out because I haven't got as much control as some of the people, you know, some of the streamers that play quite regularly. I'll only play casually. So for me, that is a big problem. And that's why I've fed back to Nacon, and I've told them I actually want my money back. Another thing about these joysticks, now, when I initially did the test on the controller tester, and you go around and it maps how much the input errors are, I got a massive 20%, like really a 20%. Now, the thing with that is it's a little bit inconsistent. I've found at some point, I actually got 2% with this controller as well. So it makes my game feel really inconsistent when I'm playing and aiming. Sometimes I feel like I've lost my aim assist, just because my muscle memory uses this thumbstick in a certain way. Sometimes I get more error and sometimes I get less. I was using the PS4 controller before with the same razors, which turn around, you know, really painful, and getting really good aim assist with that. So I don't know what exactly that is, if that's this movement making me panic too much, or if it is just the input error that sometimes this controller gives. Talking about the input error, you've got the input lag, which I've measured to 4 milliseconds. Good thing about it, it's really consistent, so it doesn't change if you're using a wire or wireless input. But the bad thing is, it's not overclockable. It's been locked to that, so you can't change it to 1 millisecond. Now, with a £200 controller, I want to be able to do that. I want the maximum performance out of it. A lot of the other controllers, even the stock controllers, you can, you know, really up the polling rate to 1,000. But in this one, it's stuck to 250. So you don't get best input lag. Hopefully in the future, Nacon will unlock that and allow us to overclock this controller. But at the moment, it's not overclockable, which is painful for a £200 controller. And being an engineer by profession, around the triggers, I don't like these gaps. I think they will potentially take up dirt, or maybe hairs will somehow get in there. You know how dirt always finds its way in. There's such a large gap around here, and also around the edges, which I'm not a fan of. If I look at the PS4 controller again, now I'm going back one full generation of controllers. Look at that, you know, they've thought this through. There's no gap here. The gap around these areas as well, it's a little bit smaller, which is great. But in comparison, this one is massive gaps. It's hard to tell on the camera, but yeah, you can really tell the difference in person. So in conclusion, I mean, that's a lot of good things and bad things about this controller. I was really in love with it at first, but after using it for a little while, I'm not too sure. There are some things that I really like, the craftsmanship, the design. I think Nacon's done a great job. Some of the other controllers that you can get, for example, the one I reviewed by Controller Mods, all they're really doing is giving you a cosmetic update and adding buttons here, which, you know, is nothing compared to this redesigned controller. Everything's pretty much unique. There isn't anything carryover. The feel for every button is unique, which is all amazing. You know, I really give props to Nacon for doing that. The feel for everything is good. Thumbstick, if that was really good. Hall effect, you know, I was in love with it, but it's really let me down. So now I just have to see how the warranty process is. I'm pretty made up in terms of my decision. I'm going to try and return this controller. I would really like to get another Hall effect controller, but currently I don't think that's going to be an option. I am looking at the Envision by Scuff, the PC-only controller. When I get that, I'll let you guys know. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, and then I'll give you my thoughts on that controller as well. Yeah, a bit of a love-hate relationship. I was getting used to it, and I was really enjoying the grip and the feel of the controller. But I think it has to go back. Make sure you hit the like button and support our small channel. We've been growing steadily. I'm looking to put out some more reviews on controllers. Both myself and Yumai are looking to get our own custom controllers. Till next time, over and out.